There was a moment in time, albeit like 20 years ago, where if you asked me, hey, 8th grade staunch, who's your favorite band? I would have responded with Powerman 5000. Not to be confused with Union Underground. As with Powerman 5000, I was all about their space-age take on power pop metal, and with the band's presence being literally everywhere for a year or two after that, I considered myself a lucky boy. I suppose, to put things into perspective, some of my other, similar favorite bands of the era were acts like, Bile, Slaves on Dope, American Head Charge, all bands that definitely took a stylistic approach to their respective sounds. So when Powerman 5000 came down from outer space, I was ripe for the picking. I never did get to see the band live, but that's really because as quickly as I got into them, I got out, because as their change in sound over the next few years, it really wasn't my thing. However, upon looking deeper into the group, I was pleasantly surprised by what I saw and heard, as it was then that I realized, they didn't start on the moon or on Mars, but rather had pretty humble beginnings and a very unique sound early on that, it really never was replicated. And honestly, I found myself really liking a lot of their more recent output. So naturally, running a fledgling YouTube channel and all, whose videos about music do way better than the ones about obscure films, I decided to give it a go. So, with that well-executed intro out of the way, let's get into the nitty-gritty, funk-laden space junk sound machine and find out what the fuck happened to Powerman 5000. Powerman 5000's origins can be traced back to 1990, when a young aspiring musician, Michael David Cummings, known as Spider One, dropped out of art school and started recording some very interesting music. Mainly hip-hop based, something that got people's attention early on and was quite the juxtaposition to his older brother Robert's band, who got started in the 80s and at this time was struggling to get notoriety themselves, although that wouldn't take too long. And for Spider One, the solo project known as Much Evil put him on the map locally and got him some accolades. For the following year, he decided to see where a full band could take him, and he formed the first iteration of Powerman 5000 in 1991. The group would independently release their first EP, A Private Little War, a project I feel was largely ahead of its time, although yeah, you can smell 1993 on this thing. It takes the best parts of the funk and groove stuff that was kind of seen in Rebirth at the time, with the groups that introduced the punk and funk elements in the mid to late 80s. Well, Powerman 5000 really took the sound and absolutely sprinted with it. The follow-up independent EP, 1994's True Force, would further push the boundaries of their sound, although it didn't venture too far off, something that Spider One would later address in his career, as he would eventually get tired of sticking to one sound and kind of veer off in new directions. But for now, the guys knew they had something special, it just had a hit. And by this time, Spider One's brother Rob and his band were getting some notoriety, so the dude stuck with it, and would also release the album Blood Splat Rating System in 1995. Nobody can really say it was White Zombie's success that paved the way for Powerman's journey, as the dude stayed busy as hell. And seeing how both True Force and Blood Splat Rating System were huge successes, they hit it even harder and wound up on that year's Ozfest, and probably toured with Nonpoint or some shit, resulting in gaining many new fans before their initial big break, if you will. Hell, they even popped up in an episode of Beverly Hills 90210. Good thing, too, because if I don't see Dylan, I die.
That was great.
Yeah, it was good. I'd like to try it one more time, though.
Oh, hey, sure. No problem. We can do it from the top, and then we'll move on to the next segment. Oh, Adam, by the way, when's your girlfriend gonna get here? We kind of need to get her in wardrobe.
Anna's still at Al's taking care of the dog.
You're kidding. Why didn't anybody say anything?
Why didn't you ask? I mean...
So with this exposure, they landed a deal with DreamWorks Records and would re-release Bloodsplat Rating System along with some new tracks and remixes as Mega Kung Fu Radio. Again, pushing the tracks from the previous albums, tracks like Earth vs. Me, Bored With Ya, and Neckbone, which they performed on The Late Show. You know, it's always amazing to me when bands do this, when they kind of like stick with singles or songs over the years on multiple albums and whatnot until they eventually hit. Like, that must take a lot of confidence, you know, usually, but here, I mean, if you put yourself in the perspective of the 90s, nothing else really sounded like this. And, you know, well, nothing else ever really did. Kind of sounding like a blending of infectious grooves with some Edwyn Collins thrown in there, maybe a little Ned's Atomic Dust Bin, and I don't know, Billy Idol's Cyberpunk album, maybe? I don't know. I guess the closest to this sound and vibe was White Zombie, but even that's drastically different.
Like a kung fu maniac, drunk on the blood of 1,000 victims. My kids are born as a don't ever system.
Fun fact though, Rob Zombie's music video directorial debut was for Powerman 5000's Tokyo Vigilante #1, as obviously seen here. You know, I'm sure this aesthetic existed out there and whatnot, but for me, well, this was the first time outside of sci-fi movies or comic books that I saw something like this. And I absolutely loved Powerman 5000's outer space wasteland era that kicked off with 1999's Tonight the Stars Revolt. I was pretty warmed up for the overall feel of the album, as I was way into Fear Factory's Obsolete and bands like Bile and whatnot. But again, I'd never seen anything like this before, not really. I mean, these dudes look like they crash landed from Mars or something. And the sound of the previous Powerman was largely gone at this point. And with the addition of Mike Tempesta and one hell of a producing team and major label behind them, they had some real success. I dig the sound here, as it's really campy, and there's a lot of melodies on this album, Tonight the Stars Revolt. Hell, there's even a cameo by Rob Zombie. So the change in sound seems warranted. Now, we all know the big single, When Worlds Collide, which again is not Turn Me On Mr. Deadman from Union Underground, I swear. But I think the best elements of the band as far as singles go is the track Nobody's Real. I mean, there's a lot happening in this track, and it kind of makes you want to dance. The band found themselves with music on video games like the Tony Hawk franchise and movie soundtracks like Bride of Chucky and Blade 2, and on some major tours and shows alike. You know, I remember them popping up on farmclub.com. Y'all remember that shit? Y'all remember farmclub.com?
And right now, performing When Worlds Collide off their amazing album Tonight the Stars Revolt. Let's hear it for Powerman 5000!
Also, the album would see a new trend started by the band. Cover songs, as they would cover Let the Good Times Roll by the Cars, and they would also introduce some kind of campy, more crooning song elements in the standout Blade Runner-esque track, Watch the Sky for Me. It's easy to throw this band kind of in the cyberpunk category, especially with this album, but it really is so much more than that, in my opinion. Tonight the Stars Revolt would be the last time the band drew my attention, however, and is what I consider to be their peak, sorta. So everything that followed, I was pretty surprised to see. as the rest of the group's career up to the present day has just kind of been documented via passing glances here and there. Like over the years, I kind of would just check in to like what's Powerman 5000 up to, you know. But honestly, it's been a while since I looked into it. And another reason I guess I got out of the band so early on was when I was younger, you know, a junior high kid, I promptly got into punk rock and like black metal shortly after I was into this stuff, you know. Yeah, I was a fun kid. So I vaguely remembered the band's next release, which was kind of begrudgingly a companion piece to Tonight the Stars Revolt, titled Anyone for Doomsday? I say begrudgingly because, well, just before the album was released, rumor is that it was pulled by Spider-1 at the 11th hour, as he saw it as a simple rehash of the previous album. And you know, already having done that, you know, and already having changed their sound pretty drastically after a few albums, he was looking to once again change it up and not deliver the same album twice. This was not well received by the rest of the group, however, as they all worked plenty hard on the album, something that saw core members leave whenever Spider pulled the album. And the single itself, Bombshell, was on a shitload of soundtracks once again, including the all-star grouping of the Freddy vs. Jason soundtrack. That year also saw the release of another cover tune in the track Relax for the Zoolander soundtrack. So even with a blunder of an album and, you know, 9/11, not a bad 2001 for the band, all things considered. So it was time to wave goodbye to Powerman 5000's Space Age era. At least until yesterday begins again. Tomorrow. The band would regroup in 2003 and seem to have completely transformed with their new album entitled Transform, completely dropping the outer space tubing and, you know, robot pantomiming and whatnot in exchange for River City Rock Fest fist bumping and pre-worn rock and roller costumes and even a new butt rock sound. And once again, just for confirmation, this is not Union Underground. Honestly, I remember this tune being played fairly often back in the day, and again, honestly, I had no idea it was Powerman 5000 until now. I thought it was Union Underground. And of course, they appeared on a lot of soundtracks, and, you know, they did a lot of big shows, they did a lot of tours, they probably toured with Nonpoint or some shit. But even so, DreamWorks was now under new management, and the group were no longer a priority, which led to the group's next few efforts being released on Spider's own Megatronic Records. You know, like the compilation album The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly Volume 1. I've got to say, you know, Powerman 5000 really does nail whatever sound they decide to go for. As far as this kind of stuff goes at the time, I don't think it was anything to be balked at, really, you know. Spider-1 really seems to have the right sensibilities to let his influences come in, but not completely take over. Not an easy thing to do. Although, I don't think those same sentiments could be said about their follow-up, punk-infused album, Destroy What You Enjoy on DRT Records. It makes sense that he went after this sound, though. You know, the pop-punk stuff was kind of in the spotlight, and hell, with members from Alien Ant Farm in the group now, it kind of makes sense. And you can really hear their influence prominently, by the way. And it's also very obvious that Mike Tempsta was out of the picture here, as was longtime member Adam 12. But overall, it didn't matter, as once again, the band drastically changed their sound. And I'd say this album may be their biggest misfire to date. It just doesn't work. I mean, it's never pop enough, and it's never punk enough. There's literally just no edge here, and most of the songs seem to be tailor-made for snowboarding video game soundtracks. In fact, they appeared on the gaming channel G4 around this time.
Please welcome Powerman 5000!
We're in the city of the dead.
And I was really surprised to see how long they kept changing it up before ultimately returning to the stars. 2009, somewhere on the other side of nowhere, saw the official return to the band's previous space antics. Although a little different, like There was also a lot of horror elements here as well, and like a replicant kind of animatronic take on the backing band and some of the music videos and live performances at least, as Spider-1 was still basically the only real member at this point. Definitely the only original member at least. And the band was still putting out some pretty cool stuff, like the music video for Supervillain had one of my favorite actors in it. You may know him from That Thing You Do, 8mm 2, and Roadhouse 2. Yeah, there's a Roadhouse 2. And while stylistically it's a supposed return to their old look and vibe, the album itself features a pretty broad mix of all their previous sounds throughout, really having a something for everyone feel, if you will. And I think it's a pretty fun album, although it wouldn't really set the world on fire, and had a few failed release dates before finally coming out. And at this point, Powerman 5000 was at a pretty weird spot fan base wise. According to Wikipedia, they got a spot on what was apparently a big fest called U-Fest, along acts like Accept, Papa Roach, Drowning Pool, and probably Nonpoint or some oh wait, Nonpoint was actually on this fest. But whether or not the album failed, I recommend giving this one a re-listen if you were ever even just a casual fan. Powerman 5000 stuck with the aesthetic and signed a small deal with Cleopatra Records. So, they did what you do when you sign a small deal with Cleopatra Records. You put out a cover album. I'll be touching more on this one, 2011's Copies, Clones, and Replicants, when I eventually touch on all of the bizarre Cleopatra cover albums, coming soon on Staunch TV. But for now, I will say, I like the robot kind of Daft Punk replicant clone style here on the cover, and in their overall design and stuff like that. Although this one really does feel like a Spider-1 kind of solo project with the PM5K moniker, if that makes any sense. Regardless, there is some clean production and some fun takes on tunes from the Cars, T-Rex, David Bowie even, and they do Electric Avenue, which I think is pretty cool. In my opinion though, they do a very underwhelming take on one of my favorite songs, Under the Milky Way by the band The Church. That same year would also see the release of the Spider-1 created MTV series, Death Valley. Overall, the album feels like a placeholder before their next studio effort, not on Cleopatra Records, 2014's Builders of the Future. Now, it's not fair to say that they were still using the space vibes, but Spider-1 knew not to completely abandon the shtick this time around, but rather would utilize it to inspire some DJ-laden industrial takes on their previous sounds. And Powerman 5000 even found themselves on a Universal Music branch for releasing. And the album really does make for a crowd-pleasing effort, and I, for one, really appreciated the industrial vibes here. There was a tour planned alongside Wayne Static for his new solo stuff, which honestly would have been the perfect match. But before they could go on tour, well, unfortunately Wayne passed. Although, ironically, Powerman 5000 would still tour with Static X years later. Ugh. Check out my thoughts on the whole Static X debacle next. Link above and in comments. In 2016, the band will release The New Wave under Pavement Records. A sort of return to form in many ways, but really, the guys were taking a more straightforward rock approach. Like, even though it touches on the industrial stuff and kind of like has a dance feel to it sometimes, and even kind of brings back the punk rock stuff again, it's basically just a very energetic affair that kind of feels like a bit too much at times. But again, it does work. Powerman 5000 was going to do what Powerman 5000 wanted to do. You gotta hand it to them for not phoning it in. They did a good amount of touring again, and a big fest with Mushroom Head. Check out my Mushroom Head video next, why don't you? And with the New Wave, the DJ-infused tracks really make for a great match with the group, and they don't forget to have fun with it. I mean, the David Bowie tribute here is one for the books. And the replicant robot look was kind of dumbed down to a degree, where now the dudes just look like Powerman 5000, you know? Around this time though, Spider-1 would cancel some shows and deal with some health and voice issues. But overall, honestly, the sounds found here on the new wave are refreshing when you consider all the places the band was able to go at this point, and where they would eventually decide to go next. And where they decided to go next was back to Cleopatra Records. You know, I'll be honest, I was worried when I saw the band re-sign with Cleopatra for a full record. As, you know, not to be a dick or anything, but I've always felt that Cleopatra is the place where artists go to die. You know, when no one else will sign a previously well-established group, it seemed Cleopatra is always there to do it. And release some mediocre stuff in turn. Or, you know, do cover albums. Or in some cases, you know, sell off entire catalogs for some subpar re-releases. There are, of course, exceptions to this rule, don't get me wrong here, and, you know, the label has put out some pretty cool albums. But I was still nervous. But all worries were set aside when Powerman 5000 released The Noble Rot in 2020, an album I consider to be among their best efforts to date. If you think the band's previous few outings were uneven or alienating to a degree, I mean, The Noble Rot really does make up for it, in my opinion.
Now this is a warning, not only a test, not for your life, not just for the light, it's break for the pests.
It both blends all previous sounds and kind of sets the band along a new path as well. Here we get a more electronic, subdued take on their sound, like not as much power metal, adrenaline tunes at all. And there's a horror movie feel throughout on songs like Movie Blood, VHS, and Special Effects. Kind of a goth club vibe too on some tracks. In fact, Spider-1 directed the video for their first single, Black Lipstick, and has some real Rob Zombie vibes here. And, you know, the goth aesthetic shines bright. Black lipstick on my sheets. And the single Strange People Doing Strange Things has a very prevalent Devo vibe, in my opinion. A band that was an early influence on Spider-1. What do you guys think? Y'all guys think this sounds like Devo?
Strange people doing strange things.
But Staunch Gang, let me tell you, if this is where the band is at this moment in 2022, still out there doing big tours, still out there giving the fans what they want, still out there killing it, I mean, I gotta say, they're at a very good place, and I cannot wait to see what they come up with next. Powerman 5000 have been touring heavily to this day, playing some pretty high-profile tours, including one with his brother Rob Zombie, and probably with Nonpoint or some shit. And Spider-1 still looks good, and seems very enthusiastic to play for his fans still. Hell yes, that's always good to see with these, you know, aging rock stars. Although, from the live videos I've seen, his voice is still in fluctuation, but hey, it happens. We still have all those classic recordings where he displays his very unique voice that cannot be denied. Again, I really think those early albums were some groundbreaking stuff, as far as aggressive music goes at least, and their contributions cannot be overlooked. As of researching this video, I am once again a fan, and even though it seems to be kind of like a Spider-1 solo act basically these days, I feel Powerman 5000's best days are still ahead of them, and I'm eager to hear what they have coming next. And in the scope of strange musical acts, or bands, or entertainers that I love, luckily for me, better late than never, I can now firmly find a spot in my bizarre musical catalog for Powerman 5000. And you can count on Staunch TV to keep you up with whatever they do next. Thanks for watching, Staunch Gang. Let me know what you think about Powerman 5000 down below and what bands I should check out next. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Especially leave me a comment down there. It really helps the algorithm. Check out everything else on the channel. In fact, I'll leave you some videos like right here. There's a good one. I don't know what it is right now, but it's a good one. And hey, here's another one. Check that one out too after that. And let's throw my face up there so you can subscribe. Thanks for watching, guys. Love every single one of y'all. Until next time, don't forget to rewind.